In a modest beachfront neighborhood in Tampa, Florida, a 29-year-old former fast food worker was about to witness the culmination of years of determination and strategic planning. What started as enduring constant ridicule from her own family for her dead-end job transformed into the ultimate reversal of fortune when she became the owner of the very properties her relatives called home. Jessica Ramirez wasn't your typical real estate investor. For 7 years, she had endured her family's mockery with quiet resilience while secretly building an empire that would forever change the power dynamic at their holiday gatherings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Jessica stood on the balcony of her waterfront condo, watching the sunrise paint the Tampa Bay in hues of orange and pink. She took a sip of her coffee, savoring both the rich flavor and the moment of tranquility before the day that would change everything. Her phone vibrated with a text from her attorney: "Closing documents ready. All properties transfer to your ownership at 2 p.m. She smiled, not with vindication, but with a complex mixture of emotions that had been building since she first donned the bright red and yellow uniform at Burger Barn 7 years ago. Back then, she couldn't have imagined that the job her family ridiculed would become the foundation of her financial independence. Yet here she was, about to become the landlord to the very people who had laughed at her career choices. Jessica's journey hadn't been simple or straight. Born to Cuban immigrants who had settled in Florida in the 1980s, she had grown up in a family that valued traditional success markers: college degrees, professional careers, and keeping up appearances. Her father Carlos was a bank manager, her mother Elena taught high school Spanish, and her older brother Miguel had followed their father into finance. The Ramirez family wasn't wealthy, but they projected an image of middle-class respectability that was central to their identity. When Jessica had dropped out of community college at 22 to find herself, the family disappointment was palpable. When she took a job at Burger Barn 6 months later, that disappointment transformed into something more cutting: mockery that masked their embarrassment. "Another day of flipping burgers, her brother Miguel would say whenever they gathered for Sunday dinner at her parents' modest but well-maintained home in the suburbs. Making big career moves?" Jessica could still hear her father's dismissive snort, the way he would look over his reading glasses with an expression that conveyed both judgment and pity. "At your age, I was already an assistant manager at the bank. Your brother was finishing his business degree." Her mother was subtler but no less wounding. "Mija, you know Mrs. Gonzalez's daughter is starting law school in the fall? And here you are still, well, you know." Jessica placed her coffee mug on the railing and checked her watch. The attorney's office was a 30-minute drive across town, and she wanted to arrive early. Today wasn't just about business, it was about closing a chapter of her life defined by others' expectations and opening one written entirely on her terms. She thought back to her first day at Burger Barn, how she'd stood nervously at the counter in her crisp new uniform, trying to memorize the complex ordering system while customers grew impatient. She'd come home with aching feet, smelling of fryer oil and feeling defeated. That night, her family had gathered around the dinner table, and Miguel had made the first of many jokes. "So, do you get free fries with that career path?" he'd asked, eliciting laughter from everyone except her grandmother, Abuela Rosa, who had shot him a disapproving look. "At least she is working," Abuela had said firmly. "There is dignity in all honest work." But Abuela's defense had been the exception. For most of the Ramirez family, Jessica's job was a punchline, a cautionary tale they could reference when lecturing their children about the importance of education. What they didn't know, what Jessica had kept carefully hidden, was that her position at Burger Barn was just the visible part of her plan. The part she let them see while she built something much more significant beneath the surface. Jessica had always been drawn to real estate. Even as a teenager, she'd spend hours watching home renovation shows and scrolling through property listings online. While her friends dreamed of becoming doctors or lawyers or social media influencers, Jessica imagined herself owning apartment buildings and commercial properties. The problem was that real estate required capital, connections, and credibility, 3 things she didn't have at 22. What she did have was time, determination, and a willingness to start at the very bottom. Burger Barn offered flexible hours, minimal qualifications, and, most importantly, a steady paycheck that allowed her to save while she educated herself. Every night after her shift, while her family assumed she was wasting time with friends or streaming shows, Jessica was actually taking free online courses about real estate investing, reading books on property management, and studying Florida housing market trends. She lived at home, paying the token rent her parents charged, and saved nearly 70% of her modest income. Jessica walked back into her condo and opened her closet, selecting a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism. As She dressed, she caught sight of her Burger Barn name tag, preserved in a small shadow box on her bookshelf. Most people would have thrown it away, erased that chapter from their history. Jessica had framed it instead, a reminder of where she started and the valuable lessons learned behind that counter. The truth was, Burger Barn had taught her more about business than her family ever realized. She learned customer service, conflict resolution, time management, and team dynamics. She observed the franchise model, studied the operational systems, and paid attention to the location strategies that made certain restaurants more successful than others. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 6 months into the job, she'd been promoted to shift leader. By the end of her first year, she was an assistant manager. Her family's reaction hadn't changed much, they still saw her as the college dropout flipping burgers. But her bank account told a different story. Still at the burger joint, Jess, her cousin Tony had asked at a family barbecue during her second year there. "Man, you should apply at my office. Even the receptionist makes more than fast food." "I'm okay where I am for now," she'd replied with a small smile, not mentioning that she'd already saved nearly $15,000 or that she was taking a real estate licensing course online. By her third year at Burger Barn, Jessica had become a general manager, overseeing 3 locations and earning significantly more than her family suspected. She had also obtained her real estate license and was working weekend open houses for a small agency. Her first commission check had been modest, but it represented something profound, income not tied to hourly wages or someone else's business. The real turning point had come when Jessica met Eleanor Winters, a 70-something property investor who had walked into Burger Barn one rainy Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor was a regular, always ordering the same thing, a junior cheeseburger, small fries, and a senior coffee. She would sit by the window, watching people and occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Jessica had noticed Eleanor's routine and started chatting with her during slower periods. One day, she'd worked up the courage to ask what the older woman was writing. "Property notes, dear," Eleanor had replied, adjusting her glasses. "I own several buildings in this area. Tuesday is my inspection day. I visit each property, check for issues, then reward myself with lunch." That casual conversation had blossomed into a mentorship that changed Jessica's trajectory. Eleanor had been investing in Tampa real estate for over 40 years, starting with a single duplex purchased with her late husband in 1978. By the time Jessica met her, Eleanor owned 27 units across the city, from small apartments to commercial storefronts. "The secret isn't finding one big score," Eleanor had told Jessica over many Tuesday lunches. "It's making consistent, intelligent moves over time. Most people want to get rich quick. I got rich slow, and that's why I stayed rich." Under Eleanor's guidance, Jessica had made her first investment at 25, a rundown duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood near downtown Tampa. The property needed work, but the location had potential, and the price was right because the owner needed a quick sale. Jessica had emptied her savings account and taken a small loan that Eleanor had co-signed. The next 6 months had been exhausting, managing Burger Barn by day, showing properties on weekends, and renovating the duplex during every spare moment. Her family had barely noticed her absence from Sunday dinners, and when she did attend, they continued their usual routine of subtle jabs and not-so-subtle questions about when she would get a real career. "You look tired, Mija," her mother had observed during one rare visit. "That's what happens when you work such demanding hours for minimum wage." Jessica hadn't corrected her. She hadn't mentioned that she now had 2 tenants paying enough rent to cover her mortgage, taxes, insurance, and still leave a small profit each month. She hadn't explained that she was tired because she was essentially working 3 jobs: restaurant manager, real estate agent, and property owner. Instead, she had simply nodded and changed the subject. There was something powerful about being underestimated, about having people dismiss your potential. It removed the pressure of expectations and created space to work without scrutiny. By 27, Jessica owned 3 properties and had formed an LLC with Eleanor as her business partner. She had also, finally, quit Burger Barn, though she hadn't announced this to her family. Instead, she let them continue believing she was still there, while actually working full-time in real estate and property management. The deception wasn't born from shame about her past, but from a strategic decision to maintain the status quo until she was ready for the reveal. Jessica had learned that her family's perception of her as the underachieving fast food worker gave her certain advantages. They didn't come to her for loans, didn't expect her at expensive outings, and generally left her to her own devices. Then, 11 months ago, everything had changed. Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving Jessica not just her knowledge, but also a significant opportunity. Eleanor's will had included Jessica in an unexpected way, giving her the first right of refusal to purchase Eleanor's entire portfolio before it went to market. The properties included several single-family homes in the Tampa suburbs, homes that, in a twist of fate, included the ones rented by Jessica's parents, her brother Miguel, and 2 of her cousins. None of them had ever realized that the sweet old lady who owned their rental homes was Jessica's mentor and business partner. The purchase would require more capital than Jessica had on hand, but Eleanor had also connected her with the right people, investors, lenders, and advisors who respected Eleanor's judgment and were willing to back Jessica's vision. And that had led to today, closing day. In just a few hours, Jessica would officially own the roofs over her family's heads. They would be her tenants, still unaware that their rental checks would soon be going into her accounts. Jessica smoothed her suit jacket, checked her appearance one final time, and grabbed her portfolio of documents. As she headed for the door, her phone rang, her mother's number flashing on the screen. "Hola, mommy," she answered, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Jessica, are you coming to dinner on Sunday? Your brother has some exciting news to share. He's being promoted at the bank." "I'll try to make it," Jessica replied, not committing. Sunday would be an interesting day for the entire Ramirez family, but not for the reasons her mother thought. Try? What could be more important than family? It's not like you have career obligations on weekends. The familiar dismissive tone stung less than it once had, but it still left its mark. "I have some business to take care of," Jessica said. Carefully. Her mother sighed. "Business? Mija, working extra shifts at a fast food restaurant is not business. When will you take your future seriously?" Jessica paused at her door, keys in hand, and made a decision. "Actually, Mom, I haven't worked at Burger Barn for over 2 years now. I own a real estate investment company." The silence on the other end of the line was satisfying in its completeness. "What are you talking about?" her mother finally asked. Confusion evident in her voice. "I'll explain everything on Sunday," Jessica said. "And yes, I'll definitely be there for Miguel's celebration. In fact, I have some news of my own to share." She ended the call before her mother could respond, a small smile playing at her lips. For 7 years, she had endured their mockery, their dismissal, their assumption that her work lacked value or potential. 7 years of, "When will you get a real job?" and "Still flipping burgers." 7 years of being the family cautionary tale. As Jessica drove across Tampa toward her attorney's office, she reflected on how those years had shaped her. The mockery had hurt, certainly. There had been nights when she'd cried in her small bedroom at her parents' house, questioning her choices, and wondering if they were right about her potential. But those painful moments had also hardened her resolve and clarified her vision. The truth was, without her family's dismissal, she might not have been so determined to prove herself. Without their low expectations, she might have settled for smaller goals. Their mockery, intended to shame her into conformity, had instead fueled her independence. Jessica pulled into the parking lot of the glass-fronted building where her attorney's office was located. Before getting out of the car, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that today wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliating her family the way they had sometimes humiliated her. It was about business, about investment, about securing her financial future. If there was a lesson to be learned, about respect, about not judging others' paths, about the dignity in all work, that would be a bonus. But it wasn't her primary objective. As she walked into the building, Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from her brother. "Mom says you're in real estate now? Is this a joke?" She smiled and typed back, "No joke. See you Sunday." The elevator. Doors opened to the law firm's reception area, where her attorney, Mark Donnelly, was waiting with a portfolio of documents and a pen. "Ready to become a landlord to half your family?" he asked with a knowing smile. Mark had helped structure the deal and was aware of the unusual circumstances. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jessica replied, straightening her shoulders. As she followed him into the conference room where the closing would take place, Jessica thought about the Sunday dinner to come. She imagined the expressions on her family's faces when she finally revealed the full truth, not just that she owned a successful real estate business, but that she now owned their homes. The revelation would change everything. Some relationships might never recover. Others might transform into something healthier, based on genuine respect rather than superficial expectations. Either way, after today, Jessica Ramirez would never again be dismissed as just a fast food worker by the people who should have supported her from the beginning. And as she signed her name on the first of many documents, Jessica realized that her journey had come full circle. The job her family had mocked had given her the foundation to become their landlord. The path they had dismissed as worthless had led her to greater success than any of them had achieved. There was a certain poetry to it, a narrative of vindication that would make for fascinating conversation around the Ramirez dinner table for years to come. But more importantly, there was a lesson about judgment, about potential, and about the unpredictable ways that determination and strategic planning could transform a life. Jessica signed the final document with a flourish, officially becoming the owner of 13 properties across Tampa, including the homes where her parents, brother, and cousins lived. As she shook hands with her attorney and accepted the portfolio containing the deeds, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. 7 years of secrets, of quiet work and dismissive comments, had culminated in this moment of professional triumph. "Congratulations, Ms. Ramirez," Mark said, handing her a glass of champagne from a bottle his assistant had brought in. "To new beginnings." Jessica raised her glass, thinking not of the past but of the future she had built for herself, one careful decision at a time. "To new beginnings," she echoed, "and to unexpected journeys." The journey that had started behind a fast food counter was far from over. In fact, as Jessica would soon discover, becoming her family's landlord was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test her compassion, her business acumen, and her understanding of what truly matters in a life well lived. The most challenging part wasn't acquiring the properties, it would be navigating the complex human relationships that came with them. As she left the attorney's office, keys and deeds in hand, Jessica stepped into the Florida sunshine with a new title, landlord to the very people who had once looked down on her career choices. The irony wasn't lost on her, but neither was the responsibility. This wasn't just about proving a point, it was about creating a legacy, about transforming an entry-level job that many dismissed into the foundation of genuine financial freedom. What her family would learn on Sunday was not just that appearances can be deceiving, but that sometimes, the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary destinations. And perhaps most importantly, that no honest work, from flipping burgers to managing properties, should ever be mocked or dismissed. Because you never know when the person taking your order might someday be taking your rent check too. The revelation that would reshape the Ramirez family dynamic was unfolding faster than Jessica had anticipated. She had planned to announce her new role as their landlord at Sunday dinner, but the universe seemed to have other ideas. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since she left the attorney's office. Her mother had called 4 times, and Miguel had sent a barrage of increasingly skeptical text messages. "Real estate? Since when? Mom thinks you're making this up to avoid family dinner. Seriously, Jess, what's going on?" Jessica silenced her phone as she drove to the small office space she rented in a converted warehouse near downtown Tampa. The industrial chic building housed a collection of startups, independent professionals, and creative businesses, a far cry from the corporate bank where her father and brother worked, with its marble floors and strict dress code. Her office was modest but thoughtfully designed, with large windows overlooking the Tampa skyline and walls covered in maps of the city's neighborhoods, each property she owned marked with a small green pin. There were 13 pins now, including the 5 that represented her family members' homes. By this time tomorrow, there would be more. She had offers pending on 3 additional properties. Jessica unlocked the door and was greeted by her assistant, Zoe, a community college student who reminded Jessica of herself 7 years ago, hungry for opportunity, willing to learn, and completely underestimated by everyone around her. "How did the closing go?" Zoe asked, looking up from her computer. "Officially done," Jessica replied, setting down her portfolio on the desk. "I now own the roof over my parents' heads." Zoe's eyes widened. "And they still don't know?" "They're starting to suspect something's up, but they don't know the full story yet." Jessica settled into her chair, mentally preparing for the conversation she needed to have with her property manager, Curtis. He had been handling most of her rentals, but the new acquisitions would require additional oversight, especially given the delicate nature of these particular tenant relationships. "I scheduled that meeting with Curtis for 4:30, Zoe said, anticipating Jessica's needs as usual. "And Eleanor's attorney called. There are some additional documents from her estate that need your signature." The mention of Eleanor sent a pang of grief through Jessica. It had been 11 months since her mentor's passing, but the loss still felt fresh. Eleanor had been more than a business partner, she had been the supporter and guide that Jessica's family had failed to be. "I miss her," Jessica said simply. "She would be proud of you," Zoe replied. Taking over her portfolio, expanding the business, staying true to her investment philosophy. Jessica nodded, grateful for the reminder. Eleanor had taught her that real estate wasn't just about property, it was about people and communities. "Property has power," Eleanor would say, "not just financial power, but the power to shape lives. Use that power wisely." Before Jessica could respond, her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from her father. She hesitated, then answered. Hola, Papi. Jessica Maria Ramirez, her father's authoritative voice filled the line. Your mother tells me you've been lying to us about your job. What's this about real estate? Jessica took a deep breath. I haven't been lying, Papi. I just haven't been volunteering information. Semantics, he dismissed. You let us believe you were still working at that fast food place all this time. You assumed I was still there, Jessica corrected gently. You never actually asked me about my career. You were too busy making jokes about it. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. Her father had always been quick with a witty comment about her job, but she was right, he had rarely asked genuine questions about her professional life. So what is the truth then, he finally asked, his tone softening slightly. Jessica glanced at Zoe, who gave her an encouraging nod. The truth is that I left Burger Barn over 2 years ago. I've been building a real estate investment business. I own multiple properties around Tampa, and I manage others for investors. Properties? What kind of properties? Jessica hesitated. This wasn't how she had planned to reveal the final piece of the puzzle, but maybe it was better this way, over the phone, without the entire family watching. Single-family homes, duplexes, a small apartment building, and a couple of commercial spaces, she said carefully. And you've been doing this secretly? Why wouldn't you tell us about something like this? The question held genuine confusion, as if he couldn't fathom why she would hide a conventional success story from her family. Because I got tired of the jokes, Papi. I got tired of being the family disappointment. It was easier to let you all think what you wanted while I built something for myself. Her father was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Your mother wants you to come over tonight. Not Sunday. Tonight. We need to talk about this as a family. Jessica closed her eyes, calculating. She had planned to use the weekend to prepare mentally for the revelation, but perhaps it was better to rip off the bandage quickly. I have a meeting until 5:30, she said. I can be there by 7 o'clock. We'll be waiting, her father replied, ending the call without further comment. Jessica set down her phone and looked at Zoe. Change of plans. The family reckoning is happening tonight. Are you going to tell them everything? Zoe asked. I'm going to tell them the truth, Jessica replied. That I own a successful real estate business, that I've been building it quietly for years, and that as of today, I own the houses where they live. They're going to freak out. Probably, Jessica agreed with a small smile. But I'm not doing this to hurt them. I'm doing it because it was a good business opportunity, and because Eleanor wanted me to have her portfolio. And maybe a little bit because it's satisfying after all those burger-flipping jokes? Zoe suggested with a raised eyebrow. Jessica laughed. Maybe a tiny bit of that too. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings, property inspections, and preparation for the evening ahead. Jessica met with Curtis, her property manager, to discuss the transition of Eleanor's properties to her management system. They reviewed tenant files, maintenance schedules, and rental terms. Most of these are solid long-term tenants, Curtis noted, flipping through the documents. Eleanor was known for keeping good people and not raising rents excessively. Are you planning to continue that approach? Absolutely, Jessica confirmed. Especially with the family properties. I have no intention of making changes to their rental agreements. Curtis raised an eyebrow. No rent increases for family? That's generous. Most landlords I know would see that as a business opportunity. Jessica shook her head. This isn't about squeezing more money out of them. It's about investment in stable, long-term assets. Besides, their current rents are fair market value. Eleanor made sure of that. As the meeting concluded, Curtis gave her a curious look. You know, when most people suddenly become their family's landlord, it's because they inherited the property. You engineered this. Why? Jessica considered the question. I didn't set out to become their landlord specifically. It happened because Eleanor's portfolio included their homes, and I wanted to keep her properties together as she'd built them. But now that it's happening. She paused, searching for the right words. Maybe there's a certain symmetry to it. They never took my career seriously, and now my career literally puts a roof over their heads. By 6:30 that evening, Jessica was driving toward her parents' home in the Palma Seca neighborhood, a quiet suburban area where most of the houses had been built in the 1960s. The streets were lined with mature oak trees, their branches forming a canopy over the road. Her parents had moved here 3 years ago, downsizing from the larger family home after Miguel had moved out. They had chosen to rent rather than buy, a decision that now seemed particularly fateful. Jessica parked in front of the modest ranch-style house, noting with a property owner's eye that the hedge needed trimming and the mailbox was slightly crooked. She made a mental note to have her maintenance team address these issues, now. That this was officially her property, she wanted it kept in excellent condition. She sat in her car for a moment, steeling herself for what was to come. In her purse was a folder containing copies of the property deeds, including the one for this house, along with her business portfolio, proof of everything she had built. While they thought she was still working the drive-through window, the front door opened before she could knock. Her mother stood there, arms crossed, expression a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and something else. Was it hurt? Mija, Elena Ramirez said, stepping back to let Jessica enter. Your father and brother are in the living room. Jessica stepped into the house, immediately noticing the familiar family photos on the walls, including several of her in her high school graduation gown, back when her parents had still been proudly telling everyone about her scholarship offers and potential. The living room fell silent as she entered. Her father sat in his usual armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose, a stack of papers on his lap. Miguel lounged on the sofa, his expression skeptical. So, her father began without preamble, you've been lying to us for years about your job. I haven't been lying, Jessica repeated, taking a seat across from him. I just stopped correcting your assumptions. Semantics, her father and brother said in unison, then looked at each other in surprise. Despite her nervousness, Jessica smiled. I worked at Burger Barn for almost 5 years. I started as a cashier and worked my way up to managing 3 locations. During that time, I saved money, got my real estate license, and started investing in properties. 2 years ago, I left Burger Barn to focus full-time on my real estate business. Miguel snorted. Come on, Jess. You expect us to believe you're some kind of property mogul now? Where would you get the money to buy real estate? Down payments in Tampa are insane. Jessica opened her purse and removed the folder. I started small, with a duplex that needed work. I lived in one unit and rented out the other. That gave me enough rental income to cover most of the mortgage. I renovated slowly, doing much of the work myself. She handed the folder to her father, who began examining the documents with the careful attention of a banker evaluating a loan application. From there, I expanded gradually. I met a mentor, an older woman named Eleanor Winters, who taught me about property investment and eventually became my business partner. When she passed away last year, she gave me the opportunity to purchase her portfolio before it went to market. Her father looked up sharply. Eleanor Winters? Your landlord was your business partner? Jessica nodded, watching comprehension dawn on her father's face. Wait, Miguel interjected, looking between them. What does that mean? Jessica took a deep breath. It means that as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, I own this house. And yours, Miguel? And the ones where Tia Lucia and Tio Marco live. The silence that followed was absolute. Her mother sank slowly onto the arm of her father's chair, one hand pressed to her chest. That's not possible, Miguel finally said. You're making this up. Page 4, Jessica directed her father, who was still holding the folder. The deed transfer was completed today. I can show you the property records online if you prefer. Her father turned to the indicated page, adjusting his glasses. His expression remained unreadable as he studied the document, but his hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly. It's true, he confirmed, looking up at his wife. She owns the house, Elena. How? Her mother asked, looking at Jessica with new eyes. How could you afford all this? I told you, I started small and built slowly. I reinvested every profit. I lived frugally. And when Eleanor died, she helped make it possible for me to take over her business. She believed in me, Jessica added, unable to keep a hint of accusation from her voice. Her father caught the implication. And we didn't. No, Jessica agreed quietly. You didn't. You were too busy making jokes about my dead-end job to notice what I was building. Miguel stood abruptly, pacing the room. So what now? You're our landlord? Is this some kind of revenge? Are you going to raise our rents? Evict us? No, Jessica said firmly. Nothing changes with your rental agreements. The only difference is that your rent checks will go to my company instead of Eleanor's estate. Why didn't you tell us? Her mother asked, her voice small. All these years, letting us think. Would you have believed me? Jessica countered. If I had told you 3 years ago that I was investing in real estate, would you have taken me seriously? Or would it have been another joke at Sunday dinner? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its accuracy. They all knew the answer. I didn't tell you because I needed to focus on building something without constantly defending my choices, Jessica continued. Every time I came here, I left feeling diminished. Like I was disappointing you by not following the path you expected. It was easier to let you think what you wanted while I created something for myself. Her father removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. We never meant to make you feel that way. Maybe not, Jessica acknowledged. But you did. Every joke about flipping burgers, every comment about wasted potential, every comparison to Miguel's banking career or my cousin's graduate degrees, it all sent the same message: what I was doing wasn't worthy of respect. Miguel had stopped pacing and was looking at her with a strange expression, part disbelief, part newfound respect. "So you own 13 properties?" he asked, referencing the portfolio summary he'd glimpsed in the folder. "As of today, yes. And I have offers on 3 more. That's..." He seemed to search for the right word. "That's impressive, Jess." It was perhaps the first genuine compliment her brother had given her in years, and despite everything, it warmed something in Jessica's chest. "Thank you." Her mother moved to sit beside her on the couch, tentatively reaching for her hand. "I don't understand why you wouldn't share this with us, Mija. We're your family. We would have been proud." Jessica squeezed her mother's hand but shook her head. "Would you? Or would you have found reasons to dismiss this too? Told me real estate was too risky, or that I should get a real job with benefits, or that property management wasn't a respectable career?" Her mother's silence was answer enough. "The truth is," Jessica continued gently, "you and Poppy have very specific ideas about what success looks like. College degree, corporate job, steady paycheck, retirement plan. My path didn't fit that mold, so it was easier for you to dismiss it than to try to understand it." Her father closed the folder and handed it back to her, his expression thoughtful. "You're right," he said, surprising everyone in the room. "We did dismiss your choices. We thought we knew better." He gestured around the living room, at the house that Jessica now owned. "Clearly, we were wrong." The acknowledgement, simple as it was, felt like a seismic shift in their family dynamic. Jessica had come prepared for anger, defensiveness, perhaps even accusations. She hadn't expected this quiet admission of error. "So what happens now?" Miguel asked, breaking the momentary silence. "Do we call you landlord at family dinners?" The question might have been meant as a joke, but there was an edge to it, an acknowledgement that the power balance in their relationship had fundamentally changed. "Nothing has to change," Jessica assured them. "I didn't do this to hold power over you. I did it because it was a sound business decision. Eleanor built a valuable portfolio, and I wanted to preserve it. But things have changed," her father pointed out. "You're not just our daughter and sister anymore. You're our landlord." Jessica nodded, acknowledging the complexity. "Yes. And that relationship comes with responsibilities, on both sides. I have a responsibility to maintain these properties, to be fair and reasonable. You have a responsibility to be good tenants. But none of that changes our family relationship, unless we let it." Her mother wiped away a tear that had formed at the corner of her eye. "I can't believe you've built all this while we thought." She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "While you thought I was wasting my potential," Jessica finished for her. "I know. But maybe that's the lesson here. Success doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it starts in a fast food uniform." The tension in the room had begun to dissolve, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Miguel sat down again, this time next to Jessica. "So tell us about your business," he said, and for once, his interest seemed genuine. "How does it work? What's your long-term strategy?" For the next hour, Jessica explained her business model, her investment philosophy, and her plans for growth. She showed them property photos, tenant statistics, and profit margins. She told them about Eleanor and their partnership, about the lessons she'd learned both at Burger Barn and in real estate. As she spoke, she could see their perception of her transforming, from the family underachiever to someone with vision, determination, and business acumen. It was a bittersweet victory. Part of her was gratified to finally have their respect, another part was saddened that it had taken becoming their landlord to earn it. "I have to ask," her father said as the conversation wound down. "Are you angry with us? Is this, owning our homes, a way of getting back at us for not believing in you?" Jessica considered the question carefully. "I didn't buy these properties to get revenge," she said finally. "But I can't pretend there isn't a certain satisfaction in the symmetry of it all. You dismissed my work for years, and now that work provides your shelter." She softened the statement with a small smile. "But mostly, I'm just proud of what I've built. And maybe a little sad that I couldn't share that journey with you until now." Her mother leaned over to embrace her, and for once, Jessica didn't feel the usual tension in their hugs, the sense that she was being measured and found wanting. "We are proud of you," her mother whispered. "I'm sorry we didn't show it before." As Jessica prepared to leave, her father walked her to the door while Miguel and their mother remained in the living room, still processing the evening's revelations. "You know," her father said quietly, "when you dropped out of college, I was certain you were making the biggest mistake of your life. When you started at that fast food place, I thought it confirmed my fears." He looked at her with new respect in his eyes. I was wrong. And I'm sorry for not seeing what you were building. Jessica nodded, accepting the apology. I learned a lot at Burger Barn, Poppy. Customer service, time management, conflict resolution, team leadership. Those skills were the foundation of everything I've built since. I see that now, he acknowledged. I just wish we hadn't wasted so many years making those stupid jokes. Me too, Jessica said honestly. But maybe we can start fresh from here. As she drove away from her parents' house, her property, she reminded herself, Jessica felt lighter than she had in years. The secret she had carried for so long was finally in the open. The respect she had craved from her family might now be possible, not because she had become their landlord, but because they finally saw her clearly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel, still processing everything, but I want you to know I'm impressed. And sorry for being a jerk about your job. Drink sometime next week to hear more about your business? Jessica smiled as she typed her response. I'd like that. And apology accepted. The journey wasn't over. Becoming her family's landlord had forced a reckoning, but rebuilding those relationships on a foundation of mutual respect would take time. There would be awkward moments, old habits to break, new boundaries to establish. But for the first time in 7 years, Jessica felt truly seen by her family. The path that had begun behind a fast food counter had led her to financial independence, professional success, and now, perhaps, to healing the family bonds that had been strained by misunderstanding and dismissal. As she pulled into the parking garage beneath her waterfront condo, Jessica thought about Eleanor and wished her mentor could have witnessed this evening's revelations. You were right, she whispered to Eleanor's memory. Property does have power, not just to build wealth, but to transform relationships and reveal truth. The journey from fast food worker to family landlord had been unexpected, challenging, and ultimately transformative. But the most significant transformation wasn't in Jessica's financial status or property portfolio. It was in how she understood herself, her worth, and her place in both her family and the wider world. The ripple effects of Jessica's revelation spread through the Ramirez family with the force of a Florida hurricane. By Saturday morning, everyone from distant cousins to her grandmother's bridge club had heard the news. Jessica wasn't just a success story, she was the family's landlord. Some reactions were supportive, others skeptical, but none were neutral. The family dynamics had fundamentally shifted, and Jessica found herself navigating this new terrain with careful deliberation. Jessica woke early on Saturday to the gentle sound of waves outside her condo window. Tampa Bay sparkled in the morning light, fishing boats already dotting the water. She made her coffee and stepped onto her balcony, savoring the quiet moment before the day's challenges. Her phone had been relatively quiet since the explosive family meeting, a reprieve she suspected wouldn't last. As if on cue, her phone chimed with a text from her cousin Tony, who rented one of the duplexes she now owned. Just heard the news. This true? You actually own my place now? Jessica typed back, yes. But nothing changes with your rental agreement. Same terms, same rent. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, this is wild, cuz you went from burger flipper to real estate mogul while we were all making dumb jokes. Respect. The acknowledgement from Tony, who had been one of the most persistent mockers of her Burger Barn job, brought a smile to Jessica's face. Maybe some relationships would be easier to reset than others. Her contemplation was interrupted by another text, this one from her grandmother, Abuela Rosa. Come for breakfast, Nieta. 9 o'clock, we need to talk. Unlike the rest of the family, Abuela Rosa had never dismissed Jessica's work at Burger Barn. In fact, she had been the only one to consistently defend Jessica's choices, reminding the family about the dignity of honest work. Her approval had been a lifeline during those difficult years of building in silence. At precisely 9 o'clock, Jessica knocked on the door of her grandmother's small house in Ybor City, Tampa's historic Cuban district. The neighborhood was a vibrant mix of old and new, century-old cigar factories converted to loft apartments, traditional Cuban restaurants next to trendy cafes, cobblestone streets lined with royal palms. Abuela Rosa opened the door, her small frame dwarfed by the elaborate entrance of the traditional casita. At 83, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her mind remained sharp and her opinions sharper. So, she said without preamble as Jessica stepped inside, you've become a landlord to these fools who couldn't see what was right in front of them. Jessica laughed, following her grandmother through the house to the kitchen, where the scent of Cuban coffee and freshly made pastelitos filled the air. News travels fast. Your mother called me last night in tears, Abuela Rosa confirmed, gesturing for Jessica to sit at the small kitchen table. Half proud, half ashamed. As she should be. She placed a cup of café con leche in front of Jessica and sat across from her, eyes bright with curiosity. Now, tell me everything. Not the version you told them. The real story. How did my granddaughter go from being mocked for working hard to owning half the family's roofs? For the next hour, Jessica shared the unfiltered journey, the tears shed after particularly cutting comments at family gatherings, the doubts she had battled, the mentorship Eleanor had provided, the strategic decisions that had built her portfolio property by property. Abuela Rosa listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question, but mostly just bearing witness to the story that had unfolded largely outside the family's awareness. You know, the older woman said when Jessica had finished. In Cuba, before we left, your grandfather and I owned a small bakery. When we came to Florida, nobody would hire him as a baker because his English was poor. He took a job cleaning office buildings at night. Jessica nodded. She had heard parts of this story before, but sensed her grandmother was heading somewhere new with it. Your father was ashamed, Abuela Rosa continued. He was 16 when we arrived, and he would lie to his American friends about what his father did for work. He would say he was a business owner, which was true once but not anymore. She sipped her coffee, eyes distant with memory. One day, your grandfather found out about these lies. He sat your father down and said something I never forgot. He said, "The shame is not in the work. The shame is in being ashamed of honest work." I never knew that, Jessica said softly. Your father forgot this lesson, Abuela Rosa said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. When he became a banker, wore suits, had a title, he forgot what it means to build something from nothing. He taught this forgetting to your brother. And they both tried to teach it to you. She reached across the table and patted Jessica's hand. But you remembered what they forgot. You saw the dignity in all work. You built on that foundation. This is why you succeeded where they would have failed. The words settled around Jessica like a blessing, an affirmation that her path, though ridiculed by many in her family, had been honorable all along. What happens now? Abuela Rosa asked. Now that they know the truth? I'm not sure, Jessica admitted. I didn't do this to humiliate them or to get revenge. I did it because it was a good business opportunity. But you enjoy the symmetry, her grandmother observed with a knowing smile. As you should. There is justice in it. Jessica couldn't deny it. Yes, there's some satisfaction in knowing that the work they mocked now provides their shelter. But I don't want that satisfaction to turn into resentment, on either side. Abuela Rosa nodded thoughtfully. The test of a person's character is not how they build success, but how they wear it after it comes. Some become tyrants with even a small taste of power. Others use their position to lift those around them. Which do you think I'll be? Jessica asked, genuinely curious about her grandmother's assessment. That, Abuela Rosa said with a wink, is still being written. But I know which one your grandfather would have expected from his granddaughter. The conversation with her grandmother left Jessica reflective as she drove to her office. Abuela Rosa had reminded her of something essential, that this moment of triumph could either be the beginning of healing for her family or the start of a different kind of dysfunction, depending on how she chose to handle her new position. At the office, Zoe was already busy organizing the transition documents for the new properties. The wall map had been updated, with the family properties now marked with special blue pins to distinguish them from the other investments. How did it go with your family? Zoe asked, looking up from her computer. About as well as could be expected, Jessica replied. Shock, some defensiveness, eventually some apologies. We'll see if those apologies translate into actual changed behavior. And how are you feeling about it all? Jessica considered the question. Validated, I guess. But also cautious. I don't want this to become the new defining dynamic of our relationship, me as the landlord, them as the tenants. We're still family first. That's a difficult line to walk, Zoe observed. It is, Jessica agreed. But it's necessary. She settled at her desk to review the property reports Curtis had prepared, but her concentration was broken by an unexpected visitor. Through the glass walls of her office, she saw her brother Miguel enter the reception area, looking both impressed and slightly uncomfortable as he took in the professional space. Zoe showed him in, and Jessica rose to greet him, unsure what to expect. Nice office, Miguel said, hands in his pockets as he glanced around at the neighborhood maps, property photos, and the whiteboard covered in acquisition strategies and cash flow projections. Very legitimate. Jessica raised an eyebrow. As opposed to what? Did you think I was running some kind of scam? No, Miguel backpedaled quickly. I guess I didn't know what to expect. I've never actually seen where you work before. The observation hung between them, a reminder of how little interest he had taken in her career until now. Why are you here, Miguel? Jessica asked, gesturing for him to take a seat across from her desk. He sat, looking more uncomfortable by the minute. I wanted to apologize. For real, not just because Mom and Dad were watching. I'm listening, Jessica said, neither accepting nor rejecting the apology yet. I was a jerk about your job, Miguel admitted. For years. I made those stupid burger flipping jokes, acted like I was better than you because I wore a tie to work. And all that time, you were quietly building this. He gestured around the office. Which is actually pretty impressive. Thank you, Jessica said simply. The thing is, Miguel continued, I was so busy feeling superior that I missed the chance to learn from what you were doing. Dad and I were talking this morning, and we realized something kind of ironic. As bankers, we helped finance other people's real estate dreams, but we never built anything like this for ourselves. Jessica hadn't expected this level of self-awareness from her brother. It's never too late to start, she offered. That's actually why I'm here, Miguel said, straightening in his chair. I want to learn about real estate, about how you built your portfolio, about property management. All of it. Jessica studied her brother's face, looking for signs that this was another setup for mockery. Finding none, she asked, why now? Because you found out I own your house? Partly, Miguel admitted with a candor that surprised her. Finding out my little sister is my landlord was definitely a wake-up call. But also because I'm realizing that the path Dad set me on, the one I've been following without much thought, might not be the only way to build something meaningful. He leaned forward, suddenly earnest. The banking job looks impressive, but you know what? I don't own anything. I help the bank make money from other people's dreams. You actually built something tangible. Something that generates income whether you show up at an office or not. The vulnerability in his admission touched Jessica. For years, Miguel had been the golden child, the example held up whenever her parents wanted to illustrate what success should look like. Hearing him express admiration for her path was a reversal she hadn't anticipated. I can teach you, she said after a moment. But real estate isn't a get-rich-quick scheme, Miguel. I built this over 7 years of consistent work, strategic decisions, and living below my means while I reinvested everything. I understand that, he assured her. I'm not looking for a shortcut. I want to learn from someone who's actually done it. Not just read about it in banking prospectuses. Jessica nodded, making a decision. Okay. Come back on Monday. Spend the day with me. See what this business actually involves, the tenant calls, the maintenance issues, the market research. All of it. Then decide if it's something you really want to pursue. Miguel's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Really? You do that? You're still my brother, Jessica reminded him with a small smile. Even if I'm your landlord now. As Miguel left, Jessica felt a cautious optimism. Perhaps this revelation, though initially shocking for her family, could lead to more authentic relationships, ones based on mutual respect rather than outdated expectations. That cautious optimism was tested later that day when Jessica received a call from her cousin Lucia, who lived with her husband in one of the single-family homes Jessica now owned. Is it true? Lucia demanded without preamble. You're our landlord now? Jessica confirmed it, adding the same reassurance she had given to Tony, that nothing would change with their rental agreement. This is so weird, Lucia said, her tone difficult to read. I mean, I'm happy for you and all, but you're my younger cousin. We used to play with Barbies together, and now you own my house? It's just strange. I understand it might feel that way, Jessica acknowledged. But from a business perspective, nothing has really changed. You were already renting this house. Just from Eleanor's company instead of mine. But it feels different, Lucia insisted. Because you're family. What happens if we're late with rent sometime? Or if we want to paint the kitchen? Do we have to get your permission for everything now? The questions revealed the complexity of mixing business and family, something Jessica had known would be challenging but was only now beginning to fully appreciate. The rental agreement spells out all of those things, she explained patiently. Just like it did when Eleanor was your landlord. As for being family, that's separate. I won't give you special treatment that I wouldn't give other tenants, but I also won't be harsher just because we're related. Lucia was quiet for a moment. You know what's really bothering me? She finally admitted. The fact that you did all this while we were all thinking you were just working at Burger Barn. Like, how did none of us know? We're supposed to be close. The question hit a nerve. Were we close, Lucia? Because I remember you making plenty of jokes about my job too. About how I'd better be careful or I'd smell like fries at your wedding. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. I did say that, didn't I? Lucia finally acknowledged. I guess I owe you an apology. You do, Jessica agreed, not making it easier for her cousin. She had spent years making things easier for everyone else by absorbing their jokes with a smile. That time was over. I'm sorry, Lucia said, sounding genuinely contrite. I was judgmental about your job. We all were. And clearly, we were wrong. Thank you, Jessica accepted. And for what it's worth, if you want to paint your kitchen, just submit the request through the property management portal like always. As long as it's a neutral color that won't be hard to cover later, it shouldn't be a problem. The conversation ended on a note of cautious reconciliation, adding to Jessica's sense that this revelation was forcing long overdue reckonings throughout her family. By Sunday morning, the day of the original planned family dinner, Jessica had fielded calls or texts from nearly every relative who rented from her, as well as several who didn't but had heard the news. The reactions ranged from admiration to discomfort to naked envy, but all shared one common element: a complete reassessment of who Jessica was and what she had accomplished. As she prepared for the family dinner, Jessica reflected on how drastically her position had changed in just 3 days. She had gone from being the family's cautionary tale to being the owner of their homes. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that she worried about an overcorrection, family members being artificially nice to her now because she held their housing security in her hands. That wasn't what she wanted. She didn't want deference based on fear. She wanted genuine respect based on a recognition of her hard work and accomplishments. When Jessica arrived at her parents' house, her house, she still had to remind herself, the atmosphere was noticeably different from typical Sunday gatherings. Usually, these dinners had a chaotic energy, with multiple conversations happening simultaneously, children running through the house, and Jessica often fading into the background as the unmarried, supposedly underachieving family member. Today, the living room fell into an awkward hush when she entered. Conversations paused. Eyes turned to her. Even the children seemed to sense the shift, clustering near their parents instead of playing freely. Jessica's here, her mother announced unnecessarily, ushering her toward the dining room where the extended family was gathering. Look who's here, everyone. The forced cheerfulness in her mother's voice made Jessica cringe. This was exactly what she had feared, artificial niceness replacing genuine connection. Mom, she said quietly, you don't have to do that. I'm still just me. Of course, Mija, her mother whispered back. It's just, everyone knows now. About your business. About the houses. And that changes how you introduce me to my own family? Jessica asked, keeping her voice low. Her mother had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm trying to show that we're proud of you. Then just be normal, Jessica advised. That's all I want. As they moved into the dining room, Jessica was greeted by a collection of relatives whose demeanor ranged from genuine warmth to obvious discomfort. Her uncle Marco, another tenant in one of her properties, gave her an exaggerated bow. All hail the new landlord, he joked, but there was an edge to his voice. Stop it, Marco, Abuela Rosa scolded from her seat at the head of the table. You sound like a fool. The rebuke from the family matriarch effectively ended that line of teasing, but the tension remained as everyone took their seats. Jessica found herself placed at her grandmother's right hand, a position of honor usually reserved for her father or oldest uncle. The seating arrangement wasn't subtle, and Jessica caught several glances exchanged between cousins. As the food was passed around, her mother's traditional ropa vieja, black beans, and rice, Jessica noticed her father standing and tapping his glass for attention. Before we eat, Carlos Ramirez began, I want to say something to everyone. As most of you know by now, our daughter Jessica has become quite successful in real estate. In fact, she now owns several of the houses where our family members live. The statement sent a ripple of murmurs around the table, confirming that while the news had spread, not everyone had fully believed it until this moment. This came as a surprise to Elena and me, her father continued. For years, we thought Jessica was still working at that fast food restaurant. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. We didn't always show respect for that work. We made jokes. We compared her unfavorably to others who had taken more traditional paths. Jessica felt a tightness in her throat as her father publicly acknowledged his mistake. We were wrong, he said simply. Not just because Jessica proved successful beyond our expectations, but because we failed to see the dignity in the work she was doing and the vision she was building. We measured success by narrow standards and missed the remarkable journey happening right in front of us. He raised his glass. So today, I want to toast my daughter. Not because she owns property or because she's become successful by conventional measures, but because she had the courage to follow her own path, even when that path wasn't understood or respected by those who should have supported her most. The toast was met with raised glasses and a chorus of, to Jessica, but she could see the varied expressions around the table, genuine pride from some, lingering discomfort from others, and from a few, particularly her uncle Marco, something that looked like resentment. As the meal progressed, conversation gradually returned to more normal patterns. Cousins discussed their children's school activities, uncles debated local politics, aunts exchanged recipes. But Jessica noticed that periodically, someone would direct a real estate question her way, about the Tampa market, about rental versus buying, about investment strategies. These questions weren't the forced small talk she had feared. They represented something more meaningful, an acknowledgement of her expertise, a recognition that she had knowledge worth seeking. It was, in its way, the most sincere form of respect her family could offer. After dinner, as people broke into smaller conversation groups, Jessica found herself approached by her Uncle Marco, whose earlier sarcastic bow had signaled his discomfort with the situation. "Can we talk?" he asked, gesturing toward the back patio. "Privately?" Jessica nodded, following him outside where the evening air was heavy with the scent of jasmine from her mother's garden. "I want to be straight with you," Marco said once. They were alone. "This situation makes me uncomfortable." "Which part?" Jessica asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "The power dynamic," he confirmed. "You're my niece. I changed your diapers, for God's sake. And now you're my landlord? It just feels wrong." Jessica considered her response carefully. "I understand why it might feel strange. But think about it this way, before Tuesday, you were renting from Eleanor, a woman you barely knew. Now you're renting from me, someone who cares about you. As family. How is that worse?" "Because with Eleanor, it was just business," Marco explained. "With you, it's complicated by all our history, all our family dynamics. What happens at the next family argument? Do I have to worry that disagreeing with you might put my housing at risk?" The question revealed the heart of his concern. Not just wounded pride, but genuine fear about vulnerability. "Uncle Marco," Jessica said gently, "I would never use the properties as leverage in family matters. The business is separate. I have a legal and ethical obligation to treat all tenants fairly, regardless of whether they're family or not." She looked him in the eye. "But I also understand if you're not comfortable with this arrangement. If you want to find another place to rent when your lease is up, I'll completely understand. No hard feelings." The offer seemed to surprise him. "You'd be okay with that?" "Of course," Jessica assured him. "This isn't about controlling where my family lives. It's about building a sustainable business that provides quality housing to good tenants. If you'd prefer not to be one of those tenants because of our family connection, that's entirely your choice." Marco studied her face, perhaps looking for signs of insincerity. Finding none, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" "I've had 7 years to think about what I wanted to build," Jessica reminded him. "This isn't an impulse decision or a power grab. It's a carefully constructed business that happened to intersect with our family when I acquired Eleanor's portfolio." Marco nodded slowly. "You know, when I first heard the news, I thought maybe you'd done this deliberately, bought our houses specifically to prove a point after all those years of burger flipping jokes. I won't pretend there isn't a certain satisfaction in the irony," Jessica admitted. "But no, I didn't set out to become the family landlord. It happened because it made good business sense to keep Eleanor's portfolio intact." "And yet, here we are," Marco observed with a wry smile. "My niece, the fast food worker everyone underestimated, now owns the roof over my head. Life has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" "It certainly does," Jessica agreed, relieved to see his tension dissolving into something approaching acceptance. As they rejoined the family inside, Jessica caught sight of her grandmother watching her with approving eyes. Abuela Rosa gave her a slight nod, as if to say, "You're handling this well." The Sunday dinner, with all its complicated emotions and readjusting relationships, was just the beginning. The weeks ahead would bring more challenges, more conversations, more reckonings as the family adapted to this new reality. But as Jessica looked around at the gathering, at the people who had dismissed her path for so long now beginning to see her clearly, she felt something settle within her. This was never about revenge or humiliation. It was about building something meaningful, something that would outlast hurt feelings and family jokes. It was about creating a legacy that began in a fast food uniform but expanded into something no one, least of all her family, had imagined possible. As the evening wound down and family members began to depart, some now returning to homes that Jessica owned, she found herself standing on the front porch with her father, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant Florida colors. "You know," he said quietly, "I spent years worried about your future. Wondering when you would get serious about your life." "I know, Poppy. All that time," he continued, "you were more serious about your future than any of us realized. More serious, perhaps, than even Miguel or I have been about ours." The acknowledgement, offered freely and without qualification, was a gift Jessica hadn't expected. It's never too late to build something new, she told him, echoing what she had said to Miguel. If you're interested in real estate, I could show you what I've learned. Her father smiled, placing an arm around her shoulders. Maybe I'll take you up on that. The student becoming the teacher, there's a certain poetry to it. As the last golden light faded from the sky, Jessica felt the weight of the past 7 years, the dismissal, the mockery, the quiet determination, transforming into something lighter, something with wings. The journey from fast food worker to family landlord had been unlikely and at times painful, but standing here now, she wouldn't change a single step of the path. 5 years after the Sunday dinner that changed everything, Jessica Ramirez stood on the stage of Tampa Bay Community College's auditorium, adjusting the microphone as she prepared to address the graduating class of the business program. The same program she had dropped out of a decade earlier. 10 years ago, I was sitting where you are now, she began, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. Except I never made it to graduation day. I left halfway through my second year, confused about my path and unsure of my purpose. My family was devastated. My friends thought I was making a terrible mistake. And for a while, I wondered if they might be right. She paused, letting the weight of that uncertainty settle over the audience. What happened next wasn't what anyone expected, least of all me. I took a job at Burger Barn. Yes, that Burger Barn, she added with a smile as a ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. The one on Henderson Road where some of you probably grabbed lunch between classes. Jessica had become something of a local business legend in Tampa over the past 5 years. Her story, from fast food worker to real estate success, had been featured in the Tampa Bay Business Journal, then picked up by larger publications. She had been invited onto local morning shows, asked to speak at business events, and eventually approached by the community college to deliver this commencement address. For 7 years, my family mocked that job, she continued. They saw it as proof that dropping out had been a mistake. They made burger flipping jokes at every family gathering. They compared me unfavorably to cousins with degrees and corporate positions. They worried about my future and wondered when I would get a real job. Jessica took a sip of water, noticing her parents and grandmother in the front row, smiling up at her with pride that no longer carried any hint of the old judgment. What they didn't know, what I didn't tell them, was that while I was working at Burger Barn, I was building something on the side. I was saving my money, studying real estate investment, getting my license, and making strategic property purchases. I was laying the foundation for a business that would eventually include dozens of properties across Tampa Bay. She leaned forward slightly, connecting with the graduates who might be facing similar judgments about their own unconventional choices. The plot twist in my story came 5 years ago, when I acquired a portfolio that, by coincidence, included the houses where several of my family members lived. Overnight, I went from being the family disappointment to being their landlord. Laughter rippled through the audience, and Jessica smiled, acknowledging the delicious irony that had captivated people when her story first became public. But I'm not here to talk about revenge success stories or how to prove your doubters wrong. I'm here to talk about something more important, the hidden value in unexpected places, and the danger of letting others define what success should look like for you. She stepped out from behind the podium, choosing a more conversational stance. Working at Burger Barn taught me customer service, conflict resolution, team management, and operational efficiency. It showed me how businesses actually function. Day to day, not just how they look on paper or in theory. Most importantly, it gave me a steady income and flexible hours while I built something on the side. Jessica gestured to the business professors seated on stage behind her. The education you've received here is valuable. These professors have given you tools and knowledge that will serve you well. But some of the most important business lessons I've ever learned came while wearing a name tag and asking if someone wanted fries with that. She paused, allowing that perspective to sink in. Our culture is obsessed with prestigious credentials, impressive titles, and conventional markers of success. We're taught to look down on certain types of work, fast food, retail, service jobs, as stepping stones at best, as failures at worst. But there is dignity and opportunity in all honest work. Sometimes, the job others mock can be the foundation for something they'll later envy. In the audience, Jessica could see heads nodding, particularly among the older graduates who had likely experienced their own versions of career judgment. The real estate portfolio I've built now includes 57 properties across Tampa Bay. I employ 15 people full-time. My company provides quality housing to over 200 tenants. And yes, some of those tenants are still my family members. She smiled, thinking of how those relationships had evolved over the past 5 years. Managing the intersection of business and family hasn't always been easy. There have been awkward conversations, boundary negotiations, and moments when I've Had to remind everyone, myself included, that rental agreements exist separately from family ties. Jessica thought back to the first major test of this principle, just 6 months after her revelation at the family dinner. Her cousin Tony had lost his job and fallen behind on rent for 3 consecutive months. The business decision would have been clear with any other tenant: begin eviction proceedings. But this wasn't just any tenant, this was the cousin who had taught her to ride a bike, who had defended her against neighborhood bullies when she was small. Family complications aside, the larger point remains, Jessica continued. Conventional wisdom told me that dropping out of college and working fast food was a recipe for failure. That wisdom was wrong. Not because education isn't valuable, it absolutely is, but because success isn't a one-size-fits-all proposition. The path that works for one person might be completely wrong for another. She thought of Miguel, who had indeed followed through on his interest in real estate. After shadowing Jessica for several weeks, he had obtained his own license and now managed a division of her company focused on commercial properties. He had found a way to combine his banking background with real estate investment, creating a unique professional niche that suited him perfectly. Sometimes the people who love us most can be the ones who limit us most severely, not out of malice, but out of concern based on narrow definitions of success. My family wanted me to succeed, but they could only envision success that looked like their own experiences. They couldn't see the path I was forging because it didn't resemble the paths they recognized. Jessica glanced at her parents, who nodded in acknowledgement of this truth. Their relationship had deepened tremendously over the past 5 years, evolving from judgment to genuine respect. They remained her tenants, but that arrangement had become simply one aspect of their multifaceted connection, not the defining feature. The question isn't whether to listen to advice from those who care about you. The question is whether to let their limitations become your own. Sometimes the greatest act of self-determination is to smile politely at well-meaning concern and then go build something no one else can yet imagine. She returned to the podium, turning to a more practical aspect of her message. I want to talk specifically about the hidden opportunities in jobs that might seem beneath your new degrees. Because here's a truth that isn't discussed often enough: entry-level positions, service jobs, and stopgap work can be strategic launching pads if you approach them with intention. Jessica thought of Zoe, her first assistant, who had worked her way up to becoming the company's operations manager while completing her own degree part-time. Zoe had applied the lessons from both experiences, creating systems that had helped the business scale efficiently during periods of rapid growth. If you find yourself in a job that doesn't match your ultimate ambitions, ask yourself, what can I learn here that will serve me later? What skills am I developing? What networks am I building? What resources does this position provide that I can leverage toward my larger goals? She leaned forward, emphasizing her next point. And perhaps most importantly, what freedom does this job give me? Freedom of time? Freedom from crushing debt? Freedom to experiment and build on the side without the pressure of immediate results? This perspective had been transformative for Jessica when Eleanor had first shared it with her. It had changed how she viewed her time at Burger Barn, not as a career disappointment, but as a strategic position that provided exactly what she needed during that phase of her journey. Sometimes the smartest career move isn't taking the most prestigious job you can find. Sometimes it's taking the job that gives you the freedom to build something of your own. The job that leaves you with energy at the end of the day. The job that doesn't consume your entire identity. The job that pays your bills while you pursue your passion projects. Jessica paused, letting this unconventional wisdom settle over the graduates. 5 years ago, when my family discovered that their fast food failure was actually their landlord, the immediate reaction was shock. But as that shock faded, something more significant emerged: a reevaluation of what success could look like. Not just for me, but for all of us. She thought of her younger cousins, who had approached their own career decisions with a new openness after witnessing Jessica's unconventional path. One had started a food truck instead of pursuing law school. Another had taken a gap year to develop an app. They had been freed, in some small way, from the rigid expectations that had constrained earlier generations. The most meaningful outcome of my journey hasn't been financial success or even the personal vindication of proving doubters wrong. It's been the conversations that started within my family and have since expanded outward, conversations about dignity in all work, about multiple paths to fulfillment, about measuring success by your own standards rather than external expectations. Jessica smiled, thinking of how her grandmother had put it during a family gathering on her 88th birthday. Jessica didn't just buy buildings. She renovated our thinking. Some of you will leave here today and follow conventional career paths. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if it's truly what you want. But others might find yourselves drawn to roads less traveled, to opportunities that don't fit neatly on a resume, to to visions that others can't quite see yet. If that's you, I want you to remember something: the job they mock today might be building the foundation for a future they'll respect tomorrow. She thought of the framed Burger Barn name tag that still held a place of honor in her office, not as a trophy of revenge, but as a reminder of where her journey had begun and the lessons learned along the way. Success isn't just about the destination. It's about how intentionally you walk the path. It's about recognizing opportunity in unexpected places. It's about maintaining your dignity and purpose even when others question your choices. Jessica looked out at the graduates, seeing in their faces the same mixture of hope and uncertainty that she had felt a decade earlier. Whatever path you choose after today, make it yours. Not your parents'. Not your professors'. Not society's. Yours. Because the most satisfying success isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. As Jessica concluded her address to enthusiastic applause, she couldn't help reflecting on how much had changed since that fateful closing day 5 years ago when she had become her family's landlord. Her business had expanded beyond Tampa Bay to include properties across Central Florida. She had launched a foundation that provided business education and microloans to service workers with entrepreneurial ambitions. She had written a book, From Name Tag to Property Tag, that had become required reading in several business school courses, including at the very community college she had once left behind. But the most meaningful transformations had been personal, not professional. After the ceremony, Jessica joined her family for a celebration lunch at her grandmother's favorite Cuban restaurant in Ybor City. The gathering included her parents, Miguel and his wife, Abuela Rosa, and several cousins who had come to support her big speaking engagement. To think, her mother said as they settled around the large table, my daughter giving the commencement address at the college she dropped out of. Life has a sense of humor. Life has a sense of justice, Abuela Rosa corrected with a wink at Jessica. The circle completes itself. Jessica smiled, thinking about how these family gatherings had evolved. The burger-flipping jokes had long since disappeared, replaced by genuine questions about her business, invitations to speak at her cousin's children's career days, and the kind of authentic respect she had once craved. Her father, who had retired from banking 3 years earlier and now helped manage several of her commercial properties, raised his glass. To Jessica, he said, who taught this old banker that success doesn't always wear a tie. The toast was met with genuine warmth from around the table. Even Uncle Marco, who had initially struggled the most with the landlord-tenant dynamic, joined in with enthusiasm. He had eventually made peace with the arrangement, even consulting Jessica when he decided to purchase his own investment property last year. As the meal progressed, the conversation turned to Lucia's daughter Sophia, who was graduating high school and considering her next steps. I'm thinking about taking a gap year, Sophia announced somewhat nervously, glancing at her mother. I've been offered an internship with a marine conservation group in the Keys. Jessica noticed how Lucia, who once might have pushed back against such an unconventional choice, now nodded thoughtfully. If that's what you're passionate about, you should explore it, Lucia said. College will still be there in a year if you decide that's the right path. The exchange might seem small to an outsider, but Jessica recognized it as evidence of a profound shift in her family's thinking. The rigid expectations that had once defined success had softened, creating space for more individual journeys. Later, as they were leaving the restaurant, Abuela Rosa took Jessica's arm, holding her back slightly from the others. You see what you've done, she asked, nodding toward Sophia and Lucia who were walking ahead, deep in conversation about the internship opportunity. I didn't do anything, Jessica demurred. Sophia made her own decision. Ah, but you created the space for that decision, her grandmother insisted. Before you showed another way, this family had only one definition of success. Now we have many. This is your legacy, Nieta. Not just buildings, but possibilities. The observation stayed with Jessica as she drove home to her waterfront condo that evening. When she had started her real estate journey, her goals had been primarily financial: build wealth, create passive income, achieve the kind of security that would ensure she never had to worry about money. But somewhere along the way, the mission had evolved into something deeper. She thought about the foundation she had established 3 years ago, the Stepping Stone Foundation, named in recognition of how her stepping stone job had become the foundation of her success. The organization provided grants, education, and mentorship to service workers with entrepreneurial aspirations, particularly those facing the kind of dismissal and judgment she had experienced. Through the foundation, Jessica had met dozens of people whose stories echoed her own in various ways: the hotel housekeeper developing a line of organic cleaning products, the delivery driver building a logistics app, the retail clerk creating handcrafted furniture on weekends. People whose current jobs were financing their future dreams, just as Burger Barn had financed hers. These connections had helped Jessica understand that her experience wasn't just a personal vindication story. It was part of a larger narrative about dignity in work, about multiple paths to success, about the hidden potential in overlooked places. As she entered her condo, Jessica paused to look at the wall of photographs that chronicled her journey: her first day at Burger Barn, the closing on her first duplex, the ribbon cutting at her office, the cover of Tampa Bay Business Journal. With her story, and most recently, a group photo from the foundation's annual scholarship ceremony. The journey from fast food worker to family landlord had been just the beginning. What had started as a personal quest for financial independence had expanded into a mission to change how work was valued and how success was defined, first within her family, then in her community, and now beyond. Jessica moved to her balcony, watching the lights of Tampa glittering across the bay. 10 years ago, she had been a confused college dropout facing her family's disappointment. 5 years ago, she had become their landlord in a moment of perfect irony. Today, she was something more complex, a businesswoman whose success had been built on lessons learned behind a fast food counter, a mentor helping others find their own unconventional paths, a daughter and granddaughter whose journey had transformed her family's understanding of work and worth. The next morning, Jessica arrived at her office early to prepare for a meeting with potential investors. The company had grown significantly over the past 5 years, requiring more capital to fund its expansion into neighboring counties. What had once been a one-woman operation now occupied an entire floor of an office building downtown, with departments handling property management, acquisitions, renovation, and tenant relations. As she reviewed the presentation materials, Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Nervous about the investor meeting? Don't be. You've got this. Remember when you managed 3 Burger Barns simultaneously? This is just a different kind of customer service." She smiled at her brother's message, appreciating how he now referenced her fast food experience as valuable rather than laughable. That subtle shift represented so much healing. When Zoe arrived, she brought coffee and news. "Your commencement speech is going viral," she announced, showing Jessica her phone where the local news had shared clips from the address. "The part about dignity in all work is really resonating." "That's good to hear," Jessica said, taking the coffee gratefully. That was the heart of the message. "Also," Zoe continued, "we got 3 more applications for the foundation scholarships. All from fast food workers, coincidentally. One's even from Burger Barn." Jessica felt a particular satisfaction at that news. Make sure they get priority. Review. As the office filled with her team members, Jessica reflected on how many of them had come from service backgrounds similar to her own. Her hiring practices had evolved to specifically value experience that others might overlook. Retail management, customer service roles, hospitality positions. She had found that people with these backgrounds often brought exceptional problem-solving skills and emotional intelligence to their work. The morning passed in a flurry of meetings and property visits. After lunch, Jessica had scheduled something special, a mentoring session with Darius Johnson, a current Burger Barn manager who had received one of the foundation's first scholarships 3 years ago. He had used the funding to purchase a small rental property while continuing to work full-time, following a path similar to Jessica's own. They met at a coffee shop near his Burger Barn location, during his break. "I just closed on my second property," he announced proudly after they'd exchanged greetings. "A duplex in Seminole Heights. One unit needs renovation, but the other is already rented to a solid tenant." "That's fantastic progress," Jessica said, genuinely impressed by how quickly he was building his portfolio. "How are you managing the renovation with your work schedule?" "The same way you did," Darius grinned. "Nights, weekends, and a lot of YouTube tutorials. But Burger Barn actually promoted me to district manager last month, so my schedule's a bit more flexible now." "Congratulations on the promotion," Jessica said. "That's significant responsibility." "Thanks. You know, it's funny, when I first applied for the foundation scholarship, I was almost embarrassed to put my job on the application. I thought it would count against me." He shook his head at the memory. "Then I found out the founder had the same job. It completely changed my perspective." "How so?" Jessica asked, curious about the impact of her story from the recipient's point of view. "I stopped seeing Burger Barn as just a paycheck or something to be ashamed of. I started seeing it as a launching pad, steady income, flexible hours, management experience. All the things I need while I build my real estate business." His words echoed Jessica's own journey so precisely that she felt a surge of emotion. This was exactly why she had established the foundation, not just to provide financial assistance, but to change how people viewed their own work and potential. The best part, Darius continued, is that I've started mentoring 2 of my crew members who are interested in real estate too. Passing it forward, you know? The ripple effect of changed perspectives, this was the true measure of impact. Not just in how many properties she owned or how much her company was worth, but in how many people had been empowered to see their own work and potential differently. As they wrapped up their meeting, Darius asked a question that caught Jessica by surprise. Do you ever miss it? Working at Burger Barn, I mean. Jessica considered the question carefully. I miss certain aspects of it. The simplicity of concrete tasks with immediate results. The camaraderie of a team working through a rush. Even the smell of the place, as much as I complained about going home smelling like fries. She smiled at memories that had once been tinged with shame but now carried a different emotional weight. But mostly, I'm grateful for that chapter. Not despite the mockery it brought, but almost because of it. Those jokes pushed me to prove something, first to my family, then to myself. That motivation helped me build everything that came after. Darius nodded thoughtfully. I get that. The doubters can be powerful fuel. Just don't let proving them wrong become your only purpose, Jessica advised. At some point, you have to transition from building to spite to building for yourself. That evening, Jessica had dinner with Eleanor's daughter Catherine, who had become a close friend over the years. They met monthly to catch up, maintaining the connection to Eleanor that remained important to both of them. Mom would be so proud of how you've expanded the business, Catherine said as they shared a bottle of wine at a restaurant overlooking the bay. But she'd be even prouder of the foundation. That's exactly the kind of legacy she valued, helping others build what she called generational possibility. Jessica nodded, thinking of how Eleanor's mentorship had changed the trajectory of her life. I wouldn't have any of this without her guidance. That's not true, Catherine corrected gently. You had the vision and determination long before you met Mom. She just helped you refine the strategy. Don't diminish your own role in your success story. The reminder was well-timed. Despite everything she had accomplished, Jessica still occasionally slipped into patterns of minimizing her achievements, a lingering effect of those years of family dismissal. Speaking of the foundation, Catherine continued, the board voted yesterday to establish the Eleanor Winters Scholarship as a permanent annual award. 5 full grants each year to service workers pursuing real estate careers. That's perfect, Jessica said, touched by the tribute to her mentor. Eleanor always said property creates freedom. Now her name will be associated with creating that freedom for others. As they finished dinner, Catherine raised her glass in a final toast. To unexpected mentors and unlikely landlords. Jessica laughed, clinking her glass against Catherine's. And to burger-flipping business lessons. Driving home that night, Jessica reflected on the complete circle her journey had taken. From community college dropout to commencement speaker. From mocked fast food worker to respected business owner. From family disappointment to family landlord. From mentee to mentor. The Tampa skyline glittered with possibility as she crossed the Bay Bridge, the same view she had seen on countless drives home from late Burger Barn shifts, too exhausted to fully appreciate its beauty but still determined to build something that would change her stars. She had done that and more. Not just changed her own circumstances, but helped shift perceptions about work, worth, and potential in ways that would outlast any property portfolio. The job her family had mocked had become the foundation of a new reality, not just for Jessica, but for everyone touched by her story. A reality where all honest work had dignity. Where unconventional paths could lead to extraordinary destinations. Where success was measured not by titles or degrees, but by the freedom to build a life on your own terms. As Jessica pulled into her building's parking garage, she thought about the framed Burger Barn name tag in her office and smiled. Once a source of family jokes, now a symbol of where it all began, the unexpected starting point of a journey that had transformed not just her bank account, but her family, her community, and ultimately, her understanding of what success truly means. Sometimes the path others mock becomes the foundation they later admire. And sometimes, the most powerful response to dismissal isn't anger or revenge, but simply building something so undeniable that it changes not just your own story, but the stories others believe possible for themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.